In 1974, WGAL completed the construction on its new tower and antenna on the hills overlooking Pelham, York County. At that time, it was the tallest man-made structure in central Pennsylvania and forever solidified WGAL as the most powerful station in the market. In 1979, the Steinman family sold WGAL to the Pulitzer Publishing Company, which ushered in a whole new era in news coverage. This was no easy task given the news-gathering technology of the day, but that did not stop WGAL, even when all the world's eyes were upon them.
There are two stories that I think, both of them, we can look back. WGAL can look back with pride, and I believe that, and there were other important stories. I'm not discounting any of them, but Agnes and 3 Mile Island.
I was the first reporter on the scene when the 3 Mile Island thing broke out.
As we drove up 283, you could see the towers in the distance, and you could see the steam coming out of the towers. And the other 2 lanes coming toward Lancaster on 283 were just chock full of people driving bumper to bumper, 20 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour. The highway was just crowded with people evacuating, and we're going the other way.
Most of us who were covering that story really didn't know that much about nuclear energy. We didn't know how it worked or what could happen if things didn't work the way they're supposed to.
We had to shoot the film, bring the film back here, put it through the Houston machine. It took 40 minutes to process it, and then look at it on an editing block and edit up the movie film.
When it came in, they process it, put it on the air, we do the show and turn and look into a monitor and try to describe what was happening.
Logistically, it was very difficult because of the distances. The coverage area of Channel 8 was so broad, so wide. It would take sometimes 2 hours to go from one end of the marketplace to get crews out, cover a story, and get back. We looked at this and had to come up with some plans and ideas of how could we better do this, save time with our crews, get more news coverage. When I came in, we were doing the 6 o'clock and the 11 o'clock newscast, and Pulitzer had television stations in other markets across the country that were doing a lot more news than what we were doing here at Channel 8 at the time. We carved out the 9-county coverage area, which the initial signal covered, was basically the Susquehanna Valley. We settled on that. It was heavily promoted in a lot of our on-air promotion as well as our print media promotion. And of course, verbalized it in all of our copy, calling ourselves the Susquehanna Valley. I had, I guess, over 300 and some people work for me. They're on air or photographers or behind the scenes. Susan Chaparro was, again, one of the early people that I hired. Joe Calhoun, meteorologist, brought him in from Omaha, Nebraska. Ron Martin. Ron worked with me in radio. And Pat Principe, who does sports. Mike Hostetler.
Christmas, children, and train just seem to be a natural part of the holiday season.
Kim Lemon, remember the days when she first came in, she was doing our morning news cut-ins and then would go out at 9 o'clock with a film camera and shoot video for a story that she would develop and work on for the evening newscast.
And for a time, I worked 6 days a week. I would do Sunday night weather. I would come in Monday mornings and I would be a reporter. And then Tuesday through Friday, I was the early bird, which meant that every morning, instead of the morning report as you see it now, I did what was called the early bird news. And beside me, there was a bird that came out and a clock on the wall, and I read these brief little news segments.
I was hired as a reporter. A couple of years later, there was a weekend anchor position opening because Kim Lemon was the weekend anchor then. They moved her to weekdays, and when the weekend spot opened, I called Ed Wickenheiser, and said, "Ed, put me in there, I'm ready." And I got the job.
Channel 8 always was on the cutting edge when it came to technology. And that was one of the nice things of working here. And live shots, for example, I mean, that was brand new to us. How do you go about doing live shots? How do you create these?
It was exciting to do live TV. Most of us had never done a lot of live TV. Some had done radio live, but live TV was a different thing, to put pictures to words and have it make sense while you're out there covering the news.
The technology has been wonderful. There's no question about that. When I started, we were shooting, as I said, we were shooting our news stories on 16mm film. We get it back to the station, there was at least a 20-minute downtime until the film could be processed before you could get the story on the air. If it was a breaking story, there was still that downtime. and that would eat away at you. We want to get it along. This is breaking news, but you had to wait. Today, with the technology, it's instantaneous. You throw a mast up on the microwave truck, or you have the satellite truck. You can take the viewer to the story as it is unfolding.
The live trucks were a big step, a giant step, going from film and being able to connect, interlink your different cities via microwave. That was one nice thing. I don't mean to put that aside, but I think satellite transmission, when we got our satellite truck, we could go anywhere in the northern hemisphere and broadcast. When you had hurricanes down the shore, we could send the truck to wherever it was on location, and there you are, live. This is what the public expected to see.
Ed Wickenheiser, I still hear from him every now and again. Whenever Ed, who hired me originally, and now I'm lucky enough to sit in his chair, whenever he sees something he likes or something he didn't like, he'll often send me a little note telling me he liked it or he didn't like it, and he just signs it, "A few thoughts from Citizen Wickenheiser." So, so we have that still as part of of who we are.
Even with all these changes and WGAL's intensified commitment to the news, locally produced entertainment programming was still every bit as important as it was in the early days. And some of the great minds that brought you those early shows really stepped up with some winners. When we return, we'll look back at a couple of shows that I know you loved for years.